Hi everyone, welcome back to the garden. In today's video, I'm talking about 5 different methods that you can use to make your garden less boring. These are tips, techniques, tricks that I've worked in here as I've designed, developed and planted the garden here so far. There are also things that I picked up on in some of the most stunning and inspirational private and public gardens I've been lucky enough to film as part of my videos for this channel. You will also notice some of these tips being used in my projects, the works in progress at the far end of the garden. I do appreciate the irony that I'm filming this on a bleak early February day. Grey sky, the wind rattling through the garden. It's looking about as grim as it's going to this year, hopefully. But it's also a great time to plan ahead, and I hope some of these tips help you with your garden plans this year. So let's get started. My first tip then is actually for those of you who've got new gardens or maybe developing part of your existing garden and are willing to do something on a drastic scale. This is my fire pit project, most definitely a work in progress, and I'm sure many of you have seen the back catalogue of videos getting up to this point from a mere crater in the ground. We're slowly getting there. But for a channel where I mainly talk about plants, the first tip is actually a hard landscaping one. It's something that's incredibly underused in gardens, well, for me anyway, and it's levels. Changes of level. Now, I know a lot of you might have gardens on a slope. You might have raised beds for access or growing plants which don't thrive at normal soil level, but they can really add so much to your garden, even if your garden's perfectly flat beforehand. Personally then, when I came to build this sunken patio and surrounding raised beds, I had 2 main reasons, but there was an unexpected bonus which I'll discuss shortly. The first reason was basically a practical one. I enjoy growing a lot of exotic plants, and here at this end of the garden, I really saw the potential for a theme of arid, Mediterranean, really unusual plants from the warmer, drier parts of the world. And lots of these yuccas, agaves, palms, they really appreciate being raised up from the soil level and giving really good drainage. As you saw in my last video, talk about how to improve the soil. For these plants really, adding lots of grit, raising them up, it's absolutely required to get them through our wetter winters. So that was primarily a practical reason. The second thing was this patio area here. I really wanted to feel like a destination in the garden, something really special you don't see every day. So for me, sinking it down a little bit more, it instantly feels like a completely different area. And as for the bonus, when you're down here, I completely underestimated how different it would feel. Not just look, but actually feel. When you change your levels in the garden, and when you sat down here, I know it's a cliche you hear about in every gardening show, but you really do feel like you could be anywhere. With these unusual plants growing up around you, the beautiful blue sky above you, not today, admittedly, but usually when the sky is blue, it's a fantastic place to be. Just by dropping the level down that little bit extra, you feel like you could be anywhere in the world, and you really appreciate what's around you and looking up at the plants too. So whether you grow diminutive alpine plants, little flowers, you can really see their miniature beauty when you're actually below them. Or if you want to go huge, great big sculptural palms, yuccas and plants like this, watching them from below, it really is an incredible treat and makes it seem so much more impactful. So definitely playing around the levels in your garden, whether it's a simple raised bed, a sunken patio, it's well worth looking at considering if you're wanting to create seclusion and a real sense of excitement in your garden. I will say though, that you don't have to go completely crazy, digging up a huge crater in your garden and mounting up soil to head height. You don't have to do that. Here, in the walk up to the fire pit, I've just got these gradual raised beds on the right hand side. So just by dropping the path down a bit, raising the soil level up over here, it lets me both enjoy growing a wide range of unusual plants here, but also just sets them up a little bit more. In the garden where most of my planting is definitely naturalistic, a little bit looser, just having these borders here, these cobble edges, helps bring a bit of formality to the garden, a real sense of structure. And when I finally get the finished level down here, whether that's going to be bound gravel, slabs or something like that, it'll really help tie the garden together and give a real impressive view as you walk out here. Hopefully. I definitely think then that when we're designing and building gardens here in the UK, levels are underused. We don't play with them enough. So whether it's a sunken patio, a raised bed, or any combination of the above, it's certainly something to consider if you're planning on building a new garden this spring. What can you do to make a patio area seem more secluded? How can you change the look and more importantly feel of a space? Levels are a great method for that. But for my second tip, it's one you will have heard of before. Yes, I'm talking about evergreens. Something that although we use a lot of here in the UK, I think we can definitely do better and have more exciting plants involved. One trap that it's easy to fall into, I know I have in the past, is that when you're designing or building a garden in spring and summer, it's very easy to plant mainly for that season and not really look at the bigger picture. Here in the UK, I know we don't like to admit it, but most of the year is like this. It's grey, it's miserable, the summer plants are nowhere to be seen. So whether you're actually out in your garden a lot these days, you might not be in the middle of winter, or you can simply see it out your windows, it really is absolutely key to prioritise those structural evergreen plants. This is something I will be talking about in an upcoming video, but for today, my tips are, when you're designing and planting your garden, irrespective of what looks good then in the garden centres, really consider what that space will look like in winter, and also think about adding some real exciting evergreen plants. I'll show you a few now. While sort of the plants I grow here in my garden then are exotics, I'm not trying to simply push those on you. There's plenty of perfectly normal garden centre evergreen plants that you can use with great success in your garden. There's also a lot of real exotics like bamboos, which might not be the best plant for every situation in a garden. I'm sure you're aware of that. But what I really want to focus on are the accessory plants. When you plant up a border, there's so many plants which might be exotics or on the edge of being really unusual or cool plants you can incorporate into any kind of garden structure. For example, here, Fascicularia bromeliads, around the base this Jubea chilensis Chilean wine palm, these grass-like plants are very, very tough, hardy bromeliads. They're beautiful things. At the minute, they're in their grass-like form, but when you see the flowers, the plants redden up with these amazing vivid blue flowers in the centre, they really are something to see. So there's a lot of exotics that you can use as complementary plants in a full-on tropical style or exotic garden, but equally fit very well with a lot of more conventional garden plants. I'll show you a couple more. Over here then, and typically not looking at its best for the video, this Euphorbia John Phillips, it really is a stunner. I know regular viewers of my channel, they'll have heard me talk about this plant before. This, usually in most winters, this winter it's definitely been a little bit blasted by the cold and frost. It looks pristine, the most glorious leaves, a beautiful colouring, a very, very tough evergreen plant. I probably chopped it back a little bit late last year, so that's why it's not looking the best right now. But usually, this is a huge mound of the most beautiful vivid green leaves. It really is an absolute stunner. There's so many exotic style plants that you can really incorporate into lots of different garden styles. Whether you want a contemporary garden, whether you want a Mediterranean garden, or a cottage garden with a slightly unusual twist, there's so many plants you'd assume are exotic that you can fit in and will grow perfectly well through our dull grey winters. Here in my garden then, I grow a lot of Trachycarpus palms, Schefflera hardy umbrella plants. There's so many plants which you'd assume would fit right in with a jungle garden. But just one or two of these can really make any style of garden take it to that next level. You can really add some excitement. Just think if your garden's completely bare, you want a very low maintenance garden, simply a palm, a couple of phormiums either side of it. And if you've got a shady garden, there's so many amazing, incredible evergreen mahonias available, for example. Whatever the style of garden you're going for, whether you really want it to be focused on summer interest, it's always worth not overlooking the evergreens and how it's going to look for a lot of the year. Don't see that as a disadvantage, see it as a real opportunity to introduce some winter excitement and cool evergreens into your garden. I know planting evergreens then, it's a real basic tip and one you've heard a million times before. It's often something that they talk about in TV shows or magazines at the back end of the year, when those plants are coming to the garden centres and really coming into their own. But I think honestly, it's more important now. For a lot of you, this spring, early summertime, planning and planting your gardens up, don't be completely consumed by the lust for summer colour, huge flowers. There's so many flamboyant, vibrant summer flowers we can get. You often forget about the real basic structure of your garden, and for me here, that's all about the evergreens. In the rush for a summer garden, we can often forget what our garden looks like for at least half the year. So it's really important, as that wind absolutely rattles through the garden here, to consider the plants that actually make it up and will make your garden look more exciting for a good chunk of the year. For my next tip then, I've come to the far end of my garden here, where a gnarled old olive tree is surrounded by glaucous blue yuccas, towering eucalyptus trees, and stunning grasses from all around the world. My next tip is to really have a theme and go for it in your garden. I know as much as anyone else, you can grow whatever plants you want to grow in your garden. There's absolutely no pressure to have an overall theme, design, style. You can simply do whatever you want and gives you the most joy. But if you want a really exciting garden with impact, sometimes fully going for a theme absolutely brings the benefits. Here at this end of my garden, which is admittedly a different theme to the jungle area further up, I've completely gone for this arid desert Mediterranean look. How have I done that? Well, the first way is very simple: repetition. I've used a lot of yuccas and a lot of the same grass through the area. If you grow 100 different plants in your garden, yes, the overall effect is certainly going to be wow, but it might be more of a confused, overwhelming wow as the plants jostle for attention and space. Whereas if you have a little bit of simplicity, it doesn't necessarily mean exactly the same plants. You can have similar forms repeated through your garden, similar grasses tied all together. It can often help really develop a theme, a style, and tie the whole area together for more of that wow factor. Going big on a style or theme then, it's a great way to add more excitement to your garden. The impact of everything multiplies when you can see so much more of the same colours, forms, textures of the plants repeated through the garden. But it's not all about the plants, believe it or not, and you can easily create a style or theme with hard landscaping. Have a look at my videos at Mark's Crazy Tiki Garden, where Mark Goodlad has definitely introduced a collection of eclectic elements to his garden. There's a tiki area, there's a barley area, there's an arid desert style area, there's a Japanese garden. On paper, you wouldn't have thought it would work, and personally I know I had my doubts when he told me about it, but seeing it all come together, the garden really feels incredible. And I think it's primarily because of his use of a good strong design in the first place, and also the structures. Mark's sense of humour, the comedy, bright, vivid structures running all the way through the garden absolutely tie it together. But whatever your budget, even if you're hand making items to go in your garden, you can really have a sense of personality and style that creates something that's greater than the sum of its parts. A couple of years ago, I was asked to help judge the front garden competition here in the village. I know, I am kind of a big deal. But for me, the gardens that really had the most impact were the simple ones that completely went for a theme. One particular garden that did very well, a beautiful front garden with a vivid purple and strong Mediterranean theme. It had all kinds of purple flowers, eryngiums, echinops running through it. A very restrained basket of plants and completely went in the theme. I believe there was over 1,000 little allium bulbs planted the year before. It was absolutely breathtaking. And there wasn't a single statement plant in there. It was just a case of really going for it, repeating and having a solid colour theme. And another one, even low budget still, was a front garden where they simply planted it with wildflowers. As basic as you'd like, something that's doing some real good for the world. But for me, what gave it so much impact was that they absolutely went for it en masse. Sometimes just dumping a load of cool plants into a garden isn't the best way of getting an exciting space because it's simply a load of plants in a garden. Whereas with a bit of thought, repeating structures and forms, colours especially, you can really add a more exciting touch to your garden. My next tip then is something you often see a lot in larger gardens, but definitely a tip that we can incorporate into much smaller spaces. Something that adds so much more excitement and a real sense of occasion. It's focal points, something to look at. One of the earlier videos of my channel is a winter visit to Chatsworth House, and I absolutely focused in on this. There's so many great examples there. Now, admittedly, we don't all have acres of rolling countryside to plant our gardens in. We don't have mile-long avenues of trees leading up to huge antique urns on stone plinths, that kind of thing. But you don't need to think in that kind of grand scale to really have something to look at in your garden. For me, a focal point, it really brings so much more drama to a space. And I know in this part of my garden here, the temptation was to have a winding path. In the whole jungle style gardens, a lot of people say that to have a winding path really creates that sense of jungle adventure, and it definitely does. But for me, there was something interesting about flipping that on its head as you push through the bamboo and walk out and see this huge beauty of palm here. This is what your eyes go to. It gives you something to focus on, and having that in the distance there, that's something to look at. It really just makes the whole garden feel like it's designed around it. And behind it, I've got the olive tree over there, sat atop that big mound. Again, another focal point. So I think it's something, no matter how big or small your garden is, it's well worth thinking about a view. It might just be a mirror on the fence, a plant in a pot, a beautiful pot, positioned so you can see it from a distance away. But there's something about having that one prominent item, whether it's a statement plant, a bit of hard landscaping, or a special feature, that absolutely draws your eye in. And personally here, I think that saving up and going for a couple of really big special plants, which obviously you could plant small and enjoy watching them grow, but I went big here. Having something like that, it absolutely makes the whole view. It ties the whole garden together and you suddenly go, wow, when you see it. And that's absolutely worth it for me. Again, using the example of Mark's Crazy Tiki Garden, having a specimen plant isn't the only method of creating a focal point in your garden. Mark's got an aqua globe in one of his circular lawns, another round globe in another, and then it's got all kinds of wall art at the back of each individual smaller space. There's something to look at no matter where you are. And I think really that's the key consideration here. Whether you're sitting in your garden looking out, or maybe watching out of a window looking into your garden, if you've got something to look at, whether that be an arch, a sculpture, a plant, a pot and urn, something special like that, it really helps draw your eye in and makes your garden massively more exciting. So definitely think outside the box, look at the views in your garden and think how you can make the most of them. And for my next tip, I've come to stand next to this palm for no particular reason, because my next tip is actually an excuse for you to go to the garden centre throughout the year. Yes, I know most of my tips are in terms of designing and building a garden, but if you've got an existing garden which is mostly planted, you can still add some more excitement to your garden. And for me, it's one of life's simple pleasures, going to a garden centre throughout the season and seeing what's available. I know a lot of the time we watch TV, you hear about certain groups of plants recommended to add seasonal interest to your garden. But it's not until you go into the garden centres and actually see them in the flesh sometimes that they can really grab you. Yes, I know you can look at your evergreen interests for winter, but what about spring? What about autumn? Often just a plant or two can really bring not just a bit of vibrancy to your garden, but an excuse to go outside and really enjoy a mooch around your garden. So for me here, I've tried to introduce some plants which bring some autumn colour at the back end of the year, but I've also tried to introduce some spring plants too. If you want to see a great example of this, check out my video, the first one in the series, over at the Secret Garden of Louth last year. Jenny and Roger have a beautiful exotic garden, and last spring when I went across, I was amazed at how much colour and vibrancy there was in the garden in spring. Most of it was hellebores, spring bulbs, but they brought so much joy to the garden. It's often easy to think about a garden in terms of what it looks like in the middle of summer, but really you can have so much more excitement throughout the year with a few extra special plants to bring that seasonal interest. When they really perform, they absolutely fill in the gap and help you get more out of your garden. Those then are just 5 tips for how you can make your garden more exciting this year, whether you're designing, planning or planting your garden from scratch or changing your existing garden. Changing those levels around, having a sunken seating area or maybe a flat area surrounded by raised beds, it absolutely changes the feel of a garden. Focusing on evergreens is absolutely key. Whether you're planting in spring or summer, you need to think about what your garden is going to look like in winter. It really is important. Going big on a style, for me, it really helps change the impact and feel of a space. You get so much more out of it and you're definitely going to get more of a wow factor for anyone visiting. Having focal points and designing and planning the garden around them, it absolutely helps draw your eye in. Rather than looking at a mess of a garden, you're suddenly, wow, I want to go over that, I want to see more of that. And it really is a great way of leading your eye through a space. And then finally, a justification for nipping to your garden centre and seeing what seasonal plants have got that you can work into your garden. It's time again to think outside the box in terms of style and what you want to get from your garden, whether it's extra flowers, autumn colour or scent through the winter months. There's so many great ideas. But my final tip is one that can help you get more excitement out of your garden. Yes, it's great to have a garden that looks exciting. It's great to look out and see green plants instead of just brown and muddy earth. It's also fantastic to have a garden that might impress people that come round or really create a beautiful, relaxing family space you all to enjoy. But the most important factor when it comes to excitement in the garden is that it's exciting for you. It's something that really invigorates you, that you want to get out in and actually work on. So my last bonus tip for today is simply this spring, create a garden project in your garden. Check out my first few videos from this year to see my garden plans and projects for this year. I've certainly got my work cut out, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Having a project in your garden, something to look forward to in spring, is absolutely what makes all this worthwhile. Looking forward to it, planning, mulling the ideas over in your head. It doesn't have to be anything grand. It can be something like a small wildlife pond, maybe planting up some jungle or tropical style pots. Honestly, having a little project, it really makes it all worthwhile. I hope you've enjoyed this video and feel free to leave in the comments below what projects are you planning this spring and how have you made your garden more exciting? I'll be intrigued to hear. So thanks a lot for watching. I'm going to go inside for some lunch now because I'm absolutely freezing, but that's what gardening's like here in the UK. Thanks again. I'll see you next time. Bye.